All right, the countdown begins.
That is rock and roll.
It's rock and roll.
That's rock and roll, people.
Countdown begins, right? To Mindhunter Season 2.
Mm-hmm.
A lot going on in the news. We have this Epstein character. Did he commit suicide?
He's burning in hell as we speak.
It's very strange because one of the things that you keep seeing people bring up is that the justice system has failed these victims, which I understand that he was on suicide watch, and then at some point they took him off the suicide watch.
They quit watching.
And then he supposedly commits suicide. Now you have the president coming out saying some crazy conspiracy stuff, saying, is it possible that the Clintons had him murdered? Which I don't even know how to respond to that. There's as much evidence that Bill Clinton had a relationship or some kind of friendly relationship with Epstein as much as Trump had a relationship with Epstein. So if the Clintons came out and just said the same thing about Trump, I don't know. I don't know what the response to that would be. I think the Clintons would want this guy dead as much as maybe Trump would want him dead. And there's a statement that Trump made about the guy saying, he's a good guy and he likes his women, but he likes them pretty young. This is like a statement he made way back in the day, but there's some video footage of Trump and Epstein at a party talking, and just the way they're talking, it looks like two creepy guys talking about girls at the party. So interesting.
See, I must be missing something because I don't know what the relationship would be with Trump, but I mean, we know that Clinton was flying around on airplanes on private jets with Epstein.
The issue with this Epstein guy is, well, one of the connections with Trump, which is not that big of a connection, but so there was some charges that should have been brought to Epstein a while ago in Florida, and that's what's kind of coming out now is all this weirdness, being that I think there was 4 individuals, and whatever I say in this episode is not facts. These are just, we're kind of talking about YouTube rabbit holes and how you can just kind of, you're watching something on YouTube and suggest, one of the things was, it was a CNN clip talking about the president, basically calling out the Clintons, saying that he thinks that they might have something to do with this guy's death. I clicked on that, and that led me down this crazy rabbit hole. So
that seems irresponsible. That's a pretty irresponsible statement there. But yeah, I don't know.
But
if Trump and this guy had any type of relationship. I know that Clinton. The weird thing with Clinton is that there is some discrepancy on how many private flights they took together. We have the Clinton camp saying that the number is this, and then we have the flight logs that are saying the number is higher. So who knows? I mean, it could be something as simple as Bill Clinton or the Clinton camp has bad information. Maybe they're not trying to hide anything. Maybe they're just misremembering. Who knows? It's really tough to say. But regardless, Epstein is not a guy that anybody wants to have any association with. He's a real scumbag. He probably I don't know the details of the whole Florida situation. I do know that there was some penalty for him there at one time. I know that the general consensus seems to be that it was a very light punishment for something that was horrific, that many people believe he probably should have spent the rest of his life in prison way back then for that. What I find interesting about this whole Epstein situation, though, and again, I'm going into this blind. You brought it up. I didn't really know we would be talking about this, but it seems to me like a book was recently released about Epstein and about what he was accused of or believed to be guilty of, and it almost looks to me like the book is what kind of forced the hand of law enforcement to come forward and say, hey, we got to charge this guy. We got to pick this guy up for all of these different charges. Mm-hmm. And then that led to his suicide. I don't know the name of the book. I don't have any information in front of me, but I'm curious to, I'd like to check that out to learn more about this situation.
Yeah, so a little bit about the situation in Florida, from what I understand, is that there was at least 4 individuals, so Epstein being one of those individuals. They all ended up getting federal immunity, and that's where the suspicion starts coming in. Again, lighter sentence for what they were supposed to do. He was a registered sex offender in Florida, but then certain probation things he wasn't responsible for doing, where other people would be. I think he had to check in twice a year, but they actually had no way of monitoring where this guy was going, again, because of when you have money like this, and you have private jets and you can fly wherever you want, and he has a residency on an island. It's kind of, some people are calling it his private island. I believe there's other residents there, so I don't think it was his private island. But, and then again, going back to the Clintons, I think the one thing that people aren't putting into the equation is a lot of these individuals that have private jets will actually rent them out. So is this a flight that Epstein and Clinton are going on together?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I'm sure there was some of that, but there's a lot of connections to Epstein in the UK, and that's one of the things that during this YouTube rabbit hole starts, these conspiracy theorists start pointing out that he was allowed to fly in areas that most people wouldn't, and also his plane was allowed to land places that other people wouldn't. And a lot of these, like military bases and stuff, things like that. Again, it's not very clear if Epstein was even on that flight or if it was just his plane. And again, so if you have, let's just say, an ambassador that's over here that then uses his services to get back there, is that why why his plane was allowed to land on some of these bases? And is there no conspiracy really at all, other than this guy was a super rich guy that had rich connections? Where it becomes interesting is there's some higher ups obviously here, but there's some higher ups over in the UK, which there's not a direct line, but some of these people that possibly had connections to Epstein actually had connections to Jimmy Savile or Salvo.
The weird thing too is if you well, not really a weird thing in light of what we believe Epstein was up to, but there were many, we should point this out, there were many people along the way that did have some kind of working relationship with Epstein that dropped him along the way. So you wonder if people weren't so blind to what was going on, or may have heard rumors and said, you know what, I don't want anything to do with this guy. I know as far as a Columbus, Ohio connection, I believe Epstein was some type of advisor or advisory role to Wexner here in Columbus, and I believe that was short-lived. So maybe he heard rumors or thought something was up, or just didn't like the guy. I think Trump said, yeah, I knew him, wasn't a fan.
Yeah, but that's not what he said, or that's not what the quotes were earlier.
Right.
And but we see that all the time, and I'm not trying to throw Trump under the bus or get too political. We see that a lot of times. How many people said Bill Cosby was their hero and a great guy, and then once he gets charged,
we thought he was America's dad.
Yeah, and then he comes out, then a lot of people start saying, well, he was a jerk to me. Not only was he doing these, creepy things and raping women, but he was just a jerk in real life. And really those stories didn't come out that much until, the accusations against him.
Did you see I think it was the second episode of Comedians in Cars, the second episode of the new season? I think it's whatever episode number it is, it's Seth Rogen.
Yeah.
And he's talking with Jerry at that diner, and over coffee, Seth was saying that that he had heard from Hannibal, the comedian.
Yeah, Hannibal Buress.
Yeah, like well before it came out in the news. And he's like Hannibal pulled me aside and told me
that
Cosby was a real dirtbag.
Well, that's what's so interesting about these YouTube rabbit holes is if you hear that on that show, that you just go, okay, well, Hannibal was telling some people. No. The full story is Hannibal started telling people years before, and then he actually started doing bits about it on stage.
Right.
The bits about it on stage then got some people to come forward and actually got lawyers involved. If Hannibal Buress never starts doing bits on stage, these accusations might never went to court. So to me, that's fascinating. And just like you said with this book coming out about Epstein,
I wish I knew. It had a really cool title too. Like I remember months ago, I was watching the news or something, and they brought up this book, and I even tried looking it up, and I can't find it now. I was gonna say the name of the title of it here, but I can't find it.
Yeah, I think. But when they talk about the system failing these victims, it's like the system started failing back in Florida, and that's where you wonder. I mean, my question one is this guy even dead? Supposedly there is a picture of him, and the meme that I saw with the picture was, rest in peace, homeless guy that had similar features to Epstein.
Oh, here we go.
And when you see the picture supposedly of dead Epstein, it doesn't look much like him. But again, I've also been to funerals of friends and loved ones where you go up to the casket and they don't really resemble themselves too much.
It's James Patterson, so immediately I feel like a moron. James Patterson, famous author, he wrote a book called Filthy Rich, a powerful billionaire, the sex scandal that undid him, and all the justice that money can buy. The shocking true story of Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, and so what's weird, though, is, like I said, there's some connection to these higher ups here, obviously, and those are kind of easy to follow, and you can see little clips of, like I said, Donald Trump hanging out at a party. Just because you're hanging out at a party with somebody doesn't mean you're close friends with them. But like you said, with the Clintons using the private plane, then it becomes, are they using the private plane as a favor? Then that becomes a little suspect. Or are they renting this plane of acquaintance that they know? But there's also, like I said, these higher up connections with the UK, and that goes back to Jimmy Savile. I believe it's Savile. Now, who was Jimmy? So Jimmy was basically like the Dick Clark over there. Very successful TV host. Did a lot of Top of the Pops was one of the shows that he did. And basically, if you got on Top of the Pops and your band played or your song was played, it's going to become a hit. And it wasn't just big over there. It was a big thing for American artists to go. Well, Jimmy Savile would raise all this money for these charities, and mainly they help like sick kids.
Mm.
So all these accusations, once he died, came out.
It was like people coming out of the woodwork were like, hey, this is what this dude was up to when he was alive. He walked around pretending to be helping people, and he was using these charities to molest children.
Yeah, and here's where it gets sad in my mind, is that there was he was a part of the BBC. His number one employer was the BBC, and there was stuff coming out, and they weren't reporting it because it became a black eye on them.
Well, and that whole situation, and I don't know this to be true with Epstein, but in that whole thing, the real pisser there is there were people that absolutely knew what this dude was up to, and they looked the other way.
Yeah,
and that's always been the suspicion with Penn State.
Right.
And
Jerry Sandusky,
that there were that's the real slap right there. That's when you look. I walk around and I firmly believe that most people are good people. That the majority of the public is made up of good people, and that there's not a ton of evil in the world. But when you see things like Penn State or the situation that we're talking about here, where people know something is wrong and they're just choosing to look the other way or choosing to ignore it, that's when you really feel bad about just everything. That's when it's very tough to be a positive person when that shit's going on.
And I'm not saying I believe everything on this. There's a documentary. Look it up. I believe you can watch the whole thing on YouTube, called Jimmy Savile and the Ninth Circle. And I'm not really for sure exactly what the ninth. If you look up the Ninth Circle on YouTube, it gets a bunch of different things, a bunch of things that aren't conspiracy, and then a lot of people use this term, the Ninth Circle, when they're talking about different conspiracies. But this documentary is some of the stuff seems very far-fetched, but a lot of the stuff on this documentary, and there's another guy named David, like Ick or something like that. Ickle. Anyways, he was a popular reporter over there that uncovered some stuff that everybody thought was like tin hat conspiracy stuff, and he was kind of basically thrown to the wolves. Well, he was talking about all this stuff that Jimmy Savile was doing for years, and people were calling him a nut job. And then when the actual accusations started coming out and people started reporting this stuff, then they're like, well, maybe this guy knows more. I mean, he was talking about it for years. So, but what was interesting was how many higher ups that Jimmy Savile was connected to that were also pedophilia or pedophiles. And then it becomes not just that Jimmy Savile is a pedophile, but that there is people in higher places that are a part of a pedophilia ring. And they've basically approved that with Jimmy Savile. I mean, I believe there was over 500 accusations. That's a lot. And there's also, I believe, again, I didn't write down notes about this because it was just this long conspiracy train. But, there's kids going missing, every couple minutes in the UK, and some of these kids, they have a lot of missing kids, even a part of these charities that they don't have any answer for. And one of the kind of sicker accusations on top of the pedophilia stuff is that these higher ups would take these kids out on these boats, and then the kids would not come back. Whatever they were, done to them, sexual torture basically on these boats, and then they would kill the kids and the kids would not come back. I don't know if that will ever be fully investigated because he's dead now, and his connections to the Queen, his connections to the the different princes, people in Parliament, all those, his connections are so high up, and then also his connection with the BBC. There was a lot. Again, what we do know for a fact is there was multiple things that the BBC has stopped from coming out, full-length documentaries, and they're not really answering for that, which I think is kind of sick. It's like, yeah, we understand that you employed him, and we understand that some of this stuff probably happened on your property, but it doesn't make it right now that you're trying to just like cover it up and keep moving forward. If some of this stuff is true, this is, a bigger problem. And a lot of people, there's just some people that just don't believe that there are these, pedophilia rings. And that's sad, but I think that's because some of this stuff is stopped. Now with Epstein, I think he did a 4,000-page, I don't know if he wrote it or if somebody helped him write it while he was in jail, but I know that there's a 4,000-page document that they have. But again, it's not very clear if it's like this bombshell document or not. Because that's what I wondered, is he killing him? Is he killing himself if he killed himself? So he wouldn't have to bring up these higher powers that maybe he was connected to, or did he just not want to stand trial, or did he get? I mean, look, we know he has some higher up connections. Did they contact him and say, "Look, we can't help you, and that's why you did this"? But I'd really be interested to see what's in this 4,000-page report that they're talking about. But like I said, there's a couple connections based off of that report that loosely kind of connect him to Jimmy Savile, and that's pretty crazy. And like I said, very loosely connect him. But it'll be interesting to see once this report comes out if people can connect more dots.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you can connect more dots, this giant black eye on the BBC and the giant black eye on the Queen, if these are connected, then how deep and how sick is this thing? And so I'll be interested to see that. And but yeah,
well, with Epstein dead, this is my prediction. With Epstein dead, there's one less person plugging holes in the wall. I think that levee's going to break eventually, and there's going to be just a ton of information and things that come out. Because again, there's one less person keeping everything hush hush.
Well, here's what's crazy, though, is one of the things that I saw on, I believe, on CNN and Fox was the security footage supposedly malfunctioned during this time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, come on, give me a break. This guy was on suicide watch. You take him off suicide watch around the time he kills himself. You're going to tell me that the security footage malfunctioned? You think that's what's so sad and all this stuff is.
Where was he being held?
I'm not really for sure. I just remember when they actually showed a picture of it. I remember thinking that's kind of janky looking. I want to say maybe he was being held in New York.
Were these federal charges? Or was he just he probably has a residence in New York. Now my guess is he's addicted to whatever sex acts he was committing.
Yeah.
And that now that he knows, I think he's in there for a while, and his counsel eventually tells him, yeah, you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. We're going to fight this. We're going to represent you, but you're spending the rest of your life in prison. We can't sugarcoat this. And I think he's addicted to this bad behavior and these terrible acts that he was committing against others. And now that he knows he can't do that anymore, he didn't want to live. He had nothing to live for.
Yeah, but also based off of these reports, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what other charges are brought because, some of the people that have already come forward with accusations, I believe some of the stuff that is in this 4,000-page report, they have been able to back up where, this was a sex trafficking ring and he had people working for him that no longer work for him, but worked for him for a long time, that are in decent positions of power, not maybe so much government, but they went on to have a good career somewhere else. Well, if you're helping run a sex trafficking ring for 10 years, you're gonna go away, and hopefully those charges will be brought. I think the thing that scares me is power and money can stop a lot of this. Is this guy? It's not out of the realm of possibilities to say that this guy had connections big enough, and if they were doing nefarious things with him, is it enough to set the guy free? Fake a suicide. The guy has an island or can live on an island, and you just go there, and that's it. We'll never see you again. You know what I mean? The guy has enough money, enough connections as possible. But I think it's more.
That takes a lot of people to be involved in that because
yes, I agree.
You have a lot of people that stand to gain something by prosecuting him.
Yes,
and so therefore, if you go, okay, well, we have X amount of people over here who stand to lose a lot by everything coming out. Well, we still have X amount, if not more, people who stand to gain a lot from him being put away. So that's
one of the ideas. The other idea
I
is that
do
somebody
believe
had
that
him murdered. I think it's more likely that he just killed himself because he's
right.
a scumbag.
Right. And I think that if there were to be a conspiracy in this situation, I would find it more likely that somebody killed him, rather than they put somebody that kind of looks like him killed. You know what I mean? It's at some point, like I love conspiracies. I love going down these different rabbit holes, and certainly at some point one of them is true. I mean, there's just enough conspiracies out there on different subjects that one of them has to be true eventually, right? But with some of these conspiracy theories, the problem for me is like a lot of times it's a good story, but if you start down that trail, it doesn't take too long at some point for you to go, wait a second, this is starting to spiral way out of control. You know what I mean? It's getting very hard to believe. So
well, I want to bring this up, and I don't want to talk too long because again, the names and things like that.
I'm running out of iced tea.
It would help if I had names and stuff. But what was interesting about this was when the guy that I believe his name is David Elk or something like that, and he's a big conspiracy guy, and he talks about some crazy stuff. Like he talks about reptilian people and things like that.
Sammy Watkins is a reptile person.
I don't know. I don't know who that is.
Sammy Watkins is a professional football player, and apparently either on Instagram or Twitter, he basically said he's one of these reptile people. He's a reptile person, according to Mr. Watkins. So
this guy, like I said,
he's a completely insane NFL football player.
This conspiracy guy has said some crazy stuff, but he's also said a bunch of stuff that has come true. It's just like Alex Jones. Alex Jones says some hurtful things, hateful things. There's a reason why he's banned. I'm not saying I'm a fan of Alex Jones. Let's get that clear. But what we do know is in the 90s, when they were talking about these rituals at Bohemian Grove, he actually recorded it. And he presented that to the public. Now, you can believe whatever you want to believe, But you can watch a video of a seance, a fake seance, but a seance nonetheless, and the whole purpose of the seance. And there's high people of government officials at these events. They go there, high officials go to Bohemian Grove, and while they're there, they did a fake seance about killing a baby. Now, that's on video, and you can watch it, and you can believe whatever you want. But, whether you hate Alex Jones or not, he brought that video to light, and again, you can believe the video or not. Just like with this David Elk guy, he was talking about Jimmy Savile for years. Nobody believed him, and then thousands of people came forward. Now, this same guy was talking, and this is where, you ready for the rabbit hole? Mm-hmm. So, this is where it gets pretty strange. Is he's talking about Epstein, and he's talking about Savile. Now, this is before Epstein's arrest, because he knew what happened in Florida. And he was saying that there's these people of power, and one of the things that they do, or one of the things that these government officials do, this is what he's claiming, is they realize they can get a lot of people to do things if they don't want to face jail time because of their pedophilia actions, right? Or if there's just maybe not enough to convict them, but it's enough to shame them publicly, that this is a way that the governments will use individuals as spies, or basically maybe it could be a one-time thing, a couple-time thing, like, hey, you did this thing, we know about it, or you're connected to this person, we know about it. For example, if they knew 2 or 3 higher ups were at a party with Epstein and that the person left but some stuff went down, the accusers could name these other guys, not as doing anything but being there. That could be enough that the government would then come in and tell that person, we have this evidence, you either want to work for us to do this one thing, or maybe multiple things, or we're going to go public with this. And he was actually tying all this weirdly to the McCanns, Madeleine McCann. And so again, I'm like, oh my God, how deep is this conspiracy rabbit hole? And I thought, there's no basis of this, right? His thought is that there's something that they got the father involved, right? And that what he kind of believed is that the reason why they were taking, there was a purpose to their vacation, right?
Yeah, so they could leave their children in the apartment while they go have dinner every night.
Right. But here's what okay, I'm not going to go too far into this. People can look it up if they want, but to me it's very fascinating. He believes that there was something, whether maybe it wasn't even pedophilia. There is connections to McCann, to these organizations that were doing experimental drugs on genes and other things like that. He thinks that's how they got him to be a spy, possibly. They visit his home and his hometown, I guess, which would have been in somewhere in Ireland. He visits there. That town is connected to these higher ups. They go visit there first, then they go on vacation. And that was 2007, I believe. Mm-hmm. One of the things that people point out is there's that famous video footage where they're on a train or something, and they're filming. What's the dad's name?
Oh, I don't know.
We've Mr. McCann, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, he says, because he's irritated for whatever reason, again, could just be a joke, but his whole thing is, I'm not here for fun. I'm here for work. And he seems very irritated. So they go to this hotel. They're there. Their kid is dies or is kidnapped. Who knows? But where it becomes interesting is this group that they basically connect him to. The head, the president of the company, the CEO of this company, was actually staying in the same complex as they were.
Mm-hmm.
And he was scheduled to stay there a little bit longer, but when the kid went missing, this guy left, which is interesting. But they were saying that they're the spies for M5 or whatever. Anyways, it gets very like deep and dark.
Very involved.
But it's one of those things where you sit there and go, okay, this doesn't make any sense. They're spies for the M5. What the, man, these people should put on tin hats and put their head in a microwave, right? But what was interesting, though, what I found as I kept digging, was there was actually a guy in an organization that got all these arms, and they were using these arms in Ireland, right? Explosive devices, guns, all that kind of stuff, right? And this guy was busted in 2009. He ended up getting all these guns and all these weapons and all these things, right? And he bought a house or rented a house in like France. But anyways, they busted him in 2009. But what is really fascinating, though, is the major spot that he was running out of was miles away from where Madeleine McCann went missing from. So that's one of those things where somebody can. To me, I wonder, did somebody hear this story about this guy being busted in 2009, and then it puts him in that same area, miles away from the McCanns, in 2007, because they know he ran a lot of his stuff through this area. I wonder if people reverse engineer some of these conspiracy theories. They go, okay, well, we know this guy was busted in 2009. We know his operation was running in 2007. We know that the McCanns were there. Okay, they probably were spies for the M5. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it not reverse engineered? But anyways, you want to, back to true crime. If you want to dive into something, look up the stuff about the McCanns being involved with M5, and you'll have a fun little rabbit hole to go down to. But that's what I always love about conspiracies, personally, to me, is maybe they're not connected at all to M5. But when somebody brings up this crazy, outlandish thing, and then you actually can find out that a guy smuggling in guns and explosives and all this stuff was working miles away from where this girl went missing, that is proof, not of the conspiracy, but there's just one piece of it that's actually true. Does that make sense?
I'm going to have to ask my favorite lizard person, Sammy Watkins, what he thinks about all this. I think he's going to be more dialed in on this than I will be.
No, my point being is like with the Epstein thing, it's like we know that they had some kind of relationship with Bill Clinton. That doesn't mean it was a bad relationship. That doesn't mean that Clinton was involved in sex trafficking. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, yeah, we don't know. I mean, obviously Epstein had a relationship with a lot of people, and we don't know what those relationships were, what they were based off of, what they involved. I mean, it very simply could be that the Clinton camp needed a plane to fly around in, and Epstein donated his plane for some of these trips. We don't.
Right,
it
right.
looks very bad,
right? But
it definitely looks very bad. But we don't know the. I think it'd be irresponsible of us as it was of Trump to add thoughts and theories onto that when. And here's the other thing too. Especially that I believe that we will know more of the truth eventually. And so I don't want to, you said don't throw Trump under the bus. I don't want to throw really anybody under the bus at this point.
Right. No, what I'm saying, though, is like when you take somebody like David Elk that is saying for a while that there is possibly a connection between Jimmy Savile, which is horrible, right? Monstrous. There's possibly a link between him and Epstein, and this is before Epstein is arrested. And it sounds so crazy of an idea, but then some of the reports have already come out, and they already have these records of Epstein's plane. Again, we don't know if Epstein's in the plane or not, but Epstein's plane flying into to military bases that he shouldn't have been flying into, having clearance that he shouldn't have had, and having connections with some of the higher ups in the UK. That's what I'm saying I love about conspiracies, is maybe there's nothing nefarious at all, but the fact that you can make the connection blows my mind. You know what I mean? Every time. It's just like when people say these higher ups are the highest powers of the world. We know that they meet at Bohemian Grove. And you go, okay, well, so yeah, they have to meet somewhere, right? So they meet at this owl retreat. Okay, who cares, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but they're talking about dark stuff, and there's pedophilia rings, and they do children sacrifices, and you hear all this nonsense, and you go, "Oh, that sounds crazy." And then somebody is able to record a fake seance of a baby being sacrificed. You can't make that up. I don't know why they're doing that. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it means anything. But the fact that that is proof. It's almost like those little parts of the conspiracy I just find so incredibly fascinating, because it doesn't prove that the conspiracy is real, but it proves that there is some weight to this.